Lapse the steering wheel here. Give me the steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on. Whoa.
Your leg, my please. Your leg.
How the f*** is this possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? From our radio. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down the interstate.
Hello and welcome back inside the Park from A for podcast number 874. Woo! This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camper. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need to do tonight for your kind consideration. Oh, do we have some news? We got big news to talk about. We didn't, rush to the social media. We wanted to put some notes together, but we're going to talk about it tonight, of course. And that means I have to introduce my co-host. Oh, you know what that means. I got to go all the way to the right coast of our nation, nestled in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., or thereabouts. She may be cuddled up this evening watching or listening to maybe Culture Club. I don't know. Or maybe she enjoyed the Tracy Chapman performance last night. She's pulled out her old Tracy Chapman, dusted off, playing that. Who knows? You love her, the lovely, the redoubtable. Grace, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Todd. Was
Good.
there a particular Culture Club song? What was, or just that you were making references to the fact that
Just reference to 80s
everything-
music.
oh yeah, old is new again. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
skinny ties. We've been we're old enough now that it's coming back around again.
It's like, no offense to Gen Z, it was like, oh my gosh, this Tracy Chapman, this young budding
she's great.
star. And it's got like, yeah, but good for Tracy. It's a
Didn't
wonderful
Joni
song.
Mitchell
She's
also
a wonderful
perform?
artist.
Yeah,
right.
I'm sure they also were like, Joni Mitchell, who's this young upcoming
who's this?
Sebastian
Right.
Loeb, right? Like, I've heard good things
Right.
about this person.
Right. So
right.
yes, I was
Yeah.
referencing that.
Very
Okay.
good.
We have a lot to cover tonight. I can't preamble. I got to jump into this. Before I jump into this, though, I do want to say a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters and let them know that we have a link on our Patreon page. If you're a Patreon supporter and you didn't know about this, that link doesn't change. So if you've got the link from a prior time that you've joined us live during these recordings, that's the same link. It doesn't change. But any of you out there that are Patreon supporters that don't know this, we have a link on our Patreon support page. You can join us in the audience. You can chat with us during the actual podcast, which several folks are, like Melton and Dave and those. So you are more than welcome to join us during these calls. We record at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in America, which is -5 GMT, and it'd be around noon-ish if I do my maths right for Australia or Sydney anyway. So, give you a little time
Math.
perspective.
There's just math. It's singular. You're an American.
I agree. But every time I say math, my British friends give me a hard time.
They're wrong.
So-
just like the extra
Yeah.
U in color. You're just wrong.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Yeah, I agree. And the spelling of curb. So anyway,
Yes, and
huge
tires.
thank you to our Patreon supporters. We would not and could not do this without you. Also, if you happen to watch us on our YouTube channel, hit the like and subscribe button and maybe even the bell icon if you're motivated, because
Ring
that
that
would help us
bell.
out on the YouTube. Ring the bell. So anyway, okay. Woo! Breaking news, Grace. Big news this week.
Before you start, I just want to
Yeah.
say I will never, ever complain about there being no news in the off season. What was I thinking? I was like,
Man.
people, take a deep breath, spread it out.
I
We still
know.
got some time before testing. We don't need it all in one
know.
week.
It's like I was just kind of getting excited about car launches, and then we have Lewis news, we've got Andretti news, and then today's bomb about Christian Horner and all the mayhem and silliness there. And I'm thinking, my gosh, what the heck is going on, man?
Can I get into my favorite car launch joke that still cracks me up, even though
Sure.
people have been making it for so long time? Is that because we had the Williams launch, right? And so Komatsu
We
is one
did.
of their sponsors. And I love the idea of like, how do you tell the team that you're really not behind them? Put your name on another car, right? Like, Like, how do you think Haas is going to turn out this year? Well, I'm sponsoring that car over there. So
Yeah,
they're
right.
not related. But I just like the idea that, your team principal's name is on another car. It's confidence.
It is
building.
good. It is confidence building.
Yeah.
See,
I'm here for all the
and if
Komatsu jokes. It was great.
If I was Gene, I would have Haas on my cars, and then I would go over to Williams and buy out there as the title sponsor and put Haas on their cars, and then maybe even Sauber, or Stake over there, put Haas on that. You'd have Haas on three teams, 6 cars on the grid. See?
Or that was
That's
a
how
missed
that could
opportunity, and Haas should be like, I'm the captain now, and put Komatsu on their car. Like, I'm
Yes.
the team principal now. Gunther Steiner, who? My name's on the car, not yours.
Oh, no, it all went wrong.
Yes, I agree.
That would have been great.
All right, let's talk about the big news, the
it.
most recent big news, other than the Christian Horner thing. If we have time, we'll get into that. But we're going to talk about Lewis to Ferrari. It was announced on Thursday that Lewis Hamilton will be executing his escape clause in his 2-year deal with Mercedes to leave the team at the end of this season and join Ferrari. Now, I'm going to try to break this down just so you can make mental notes, folks. I want to break this down into the 3 entities. So first, we're going to talk about Lewis and all the concepts around Lewis. Then we're going to talk about Ferrari, and then we're going to talk about Mercedes. And after that, then we're going to talk a little bit about the orbital impacts, like the empty seat, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, those kind of things. So that's kind of the way we're going to go about that. So let's jump in at the top and let's talk specifically about Lewis in this situation. First up, Lewis has stated in the past that he's always had an affinity for Ferrari. I don't think that's a big mystery. He drives a Ferrari at home, right? And yet the timing just was never really right for a move to Ferrari. They've courted him for quite a while. There's been many suppositions about why he chose to leave and the timing of his departure, which, to be fair, it strikes me, it smacks of a leak to me, because it wasn't like Ferrari and Lewis came out in a joint statement to the press and said, ta-da, guess what? We have big, exciting news. Lewis Hamilton is signing for Ferrari. The story broke, and then the actual comment from Ferrari and even the comment from Lewis seemed like reactionary comments to the press, not a full court press event and a big announcement, right? And you could argue, yeah, they were trying to be magnanimous with Mercedes. They didn't want to overblow it and those kind of things, but it could have been leaked, or
the same people that had like 7,000 dancers climbing up a building at their anniversary, they don't want to make a big deal out of things? Come on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Landing Lewis Hamilton for any team would be an epic PR move, and you would think that they'd want to make the most of that. So that's why I kind of feel like it was sort of leaked and conveniently was a smoke cloud for all the Andretti incoming fire that Formula One was taking. So anyway, Lewis was looking for a long-term deal. I think when you really parse this out, this is just my personal opinion, Lewis was looking for a long-term deal from Mercedes that would include, call it stiff salary, right? And also a post-racing role as an ambassador for Mercedes with a direct tie-in for his Mission 44 program, and wanted investments in that, right? Now, if you've read my editorials over the last couple of years or listened to the podcast, I said if I was a Mercedes, I would absolutely not do that. No offense, but you're putting a lot. You're saying, okay, well, Lewis has this big Instagram platform that he can promote Mercedes, and that's all great. But all it takes is one slip, and all of a sudden that platform loses a lot of its appeal, and you can't control that because it's his personal platform. There's a lot of detail in signing up for something like that. So my recommendation for Mercedes is not to do that. Well, Mercedes didn't. They did not give him that. They offered him a 2-year driving deal that he signed last year. It was a 2-year deal with an escape clause for 2025, which he duly took with short order, right? And that was announced just right into the first part of this year. The 2024 season hasn't even started. It's rumored, not published, but it's rumored that Ferrari did offer an astounding at least $60+ million deal. Some argue up towards $100 million. That was rumored, and including an investment in Mission 44 and a post-racing ambassador role. But as I said, Ferrari have not confirmed that. It's logical to me to think that some of that rumor may be true because that's what he wanted, right? And it would have provided him a soft landing for retirement that Lewis was looking for that Mercedes did not offer. And again, I agree with Mercedes, but they didn't offer that, and perhaps Ferrari did. Lewis has a great track record of joining a different team just as they're rising, right? And so he may be looking for the retirement plan as well as a new challenge to try to do what Alonso and Vettel could not do, which is to recreate that sort of Schumacher era, right? There's no doubt he wants to win the 8th title, but he'd also like to dispel the rumor that he can't drive for multiple teams and win, right? That was always one of the lingering criticisms of Lewis, which I'm not sure how fair that
Did run for
was.
another team.
Yeah, McLaren and Mercedes, right?
That's true.
The end, in the end, this is just, as I said, these are my personal opinions. Then we'll jump in and get Grace's. In the end, Lewis has to think about Lewis as retirement for these guys is in their 40s, folks. And there's a lot of
for
life.
him, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of life to live beyond that point onward. And they've grown accustomed to their compensation levels, their lifestyles, and would like to continue to earn that kind of money after hanging up the helmet. You can't blame Lewis for wanting to cash in on his record-breaking career. And so he should. Right? He should. So he's had record-breaking career performance, his impact on F1, like any championship-winning athlete, such as, I think of Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Jeff Gordon, Mario Andretti, Jenson Button, Damon Hill. All of them have sought careers beyond racing, that they've capitalized on their footprint on the sport that they were in. And they've made a career post-racing on their career, right? So I think it makes sense for Lewis to do that. All these athletes have tried to create the best possible post-racing career they can. And Lewis knows that his Mission 44 might be the right vehicle to use to create this sort of post-racing career, create some wealth building, that recurring revenue after racing. He wants to create a role that would allow him to try and make an impact on the motorsport world. And while Mercedes weren't interested at the time, perhaps Ferrari are. So there's lots of supposition. Well, does Lewis know something about the competitiveness and their trajectory to being competitive about Mercedes that we don't know? The flip side of that coin, maybe he knows something about Ferrari and the likelihood of them becoming more successful over the year or two that we don't know. Maybe. I think those are all layers in a decision. I think the most Formula One drivers, most all of them would love to drive for Ferrari, right? And so I think those are all layers that I'm sure Lewis thought through. He just changed his management right at the beginning of the year. Right. I'm sure his new management and Lewis thought through all the different permutations. What if it is successful? What if it's not successful? What do we think Charles' response is? What do we think, all of this is? But in my mind, and I don't say this as a criticism at all, because if I was Lewis, I'd do the exact same thing. He's got to think beyond the racing. And if he could tie his brand to Ferrari's, that's huge, especially in retirement as an ambassador for Ferrari, supporting his Mission 44 efforts and work. That's a huge, huge thing for Lewis. So those are my thoughts on Lewis's motivation, what might be at play there. Grace, what did you think about Lewis?
Well, I think too, especially with the Mission 44, that's not just a way to make money, right? So that's building, sorry. Remember the cold I had last week? Still here. And I'm trying my best not to cough through this whole show. So I apologize, but it will continue to happen. I have 12 beverages here trying to find the magic solution. But that is something that you work hard to make sure stays after you leave, because that would be the worst, to work on, a diversity platform to get people that aren't just current Formula One people that are plugged into this system? How do you get other people into it? How do you get more women? How do you get more minorities? And then you retire and we throw up your whole DEI plan into the trash can, right? So he really does have to build that foundation so it's a part of Formula One and isn't just something that Formula One pays lip service to while the black guys here, right? So I think there's a part of that is a bit separate from the sort of fashion or the brand ambassador that is really beneficial to him and a company on a capital level. So there's that part of it. But I think that I've left jobs, surprise, and I'm sure many of us do. And I think it's easy to forget that Formula One for these guys it's a job just like the rest of us in that sense, that I've worked in a field and I've switched jobs and I've had people say to me, well, I didn't know you were looking for a job. Guess what? I'm always looking for a job. And I work in a small field, but it's not a field as small as 10 teams, right? You're always looking for a job. You always have to be looking for that opportunity because there's so few in that sport. So I think you always have to have like your ears and 12 other people's ears to the ground in Formula One because you never know when that opportunity is going to come up. And you always have to be thinking about where you want to go. What, for me, it's like, what survey have I always wanted to work on? Or what agency do I want to work at? And you always have to wait for those openings. And sometimes they come at times and it's not like, I hate my job. You can't wait until you hate your job to look for a new job, right? So you always have to kind of have this place where you're always kind of looking for your next opportunity while you're still currently secure in your current opportunity and weigh those things. So I think the same thing came up with McLaren. I thought it was at first I was like, oh my God, it's nuts you're leaving McLaren. But then it made sense. He wanted a lot more freedom than Ron was ever going to give him. And so it made sense to go to Mercedes. And in hindsight, that seems smart. And so I think that's part of it is like, how's that hindsight going to work out for him at Ferrari, that being able to see what it's a whole different environment. But I'm for sure. That was the joke that like when Sebastian Vettel left Formula One, the only person that has a cell phone number is Lewis Hamilton. So like for sure he called Vettel. For sure he talked to Alonso. Like for sure he talked to Leclerc. Like, he did his homework just like you or I would do. If company X called you, Tom, was like, hey, we want to make you this and this and this, you're going to find a buddy that works there and be like, hey, you worked there. What's up? Right? Like nobody just jumps into the unknown in that way. So I think from that sense, he's going to know. And if it turns out to be flat, if it turns out to be more like Michael Schumacher at Mercedes than Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, he has to live with that, right? He's the one that made this decision. And he's the one that's at the end of the day that's going to have that. But if he gets an East championship with Ferrari, I'm going to be very torn. As I guess I am with every championship that Ferrari gets for people that drove up my team. But I'll just take it as one for my team.
Right.
So I think we can't know yet. I think just like I guess that's my take home for Lewis, is that we won't really know. Right. It'll take a little bit to come out, just like it did with Mercedes, because the initial shock was just like, what? You're leaving McLaren? Why would you do that? Well, now it makes a lot more sense with hindsight.
Yeah. So let's talk about Ferrari's role and their position in this. Ferrari. Ferrari have always said that they like to hire champions. And even when Luca Di Montezemolo was there as the boss, they always hired champions, right? When they hired Alonso, or they hired Vettel, or they hired Schumacher, right? Or they hired Kimi, who was at the top of his game then. So they always like to hire champions in that case. Schumacher, Alonso, Vettel, and now Hamilton, they like drivers that are at their peak, that can deliver champions. It removes one significant element for them, that the only thing they need to focus on is the car, because they know they have the driver to do it. So focusing on the car is one thing that they do. Now, this may not be as evident to non-Ferrari fans, but the Tifosi will know that Fred Vasseur is making some serious inroads at Ferrari with key appointments, such as poaching Loic Serra from Mercedes last year. Now Lewis Hamilton, who was Fred's driver during GP2, GP3. Fred was his boss. Fred has been around and he knows what he's doing. But can he recreate the Jean-Todt Schumacher era? Well, time will tell, and time will tell whether that's with Lewis or somebody else. But the fact is that Fred is making positive impacts for Ferrari in aggregate. And speaking of Todt, also just don't forget Nicholas Todt, who is the manager of Charles Leclerc. So keep that in mind as we go into. That's my dog. It's mad he's not in here with
poor
me.
baby.
I know he's not happy. So if Ferrari have given Lewis a 60, 80, $100 million package and assured investment in Mission 44 and a post-racing ambassador role, they will benefit, no doubt, from the Hamilton brand and platform that Mercedes won't, right? They won all those titles with Lewis, but they won't benefit from that continued relationship and association, that platform that Ferrari will. The post-racing portion of the contract, I believe, is more important than the racing portion. And I hope Lewis's lawyers have scoured the small print on that side, because a key here will be how much leash Lewis gives Ferrari and how much leash Ferrari gives Lewis with these initiatives going forward, right? I say this because, now here's where we get into some granularity about Ferrari. I say this because I've spoken a few times to Stefano Lai, who is the head of Ferrari's global head of brand, global. He is in charge of Ferrari's entire brand, right? And I had a long conversation with him. And I can tell you that as big as you may think Lewis is, Ferrari eclipse him. It's like the sun to Mercury. All right. Lewis is terrific, but Ferrari is galactic in brand, scope, history, and the impact on history, if not just the impact on history in motorsport, the history on Earth, period. That's how big that brand is. And when you think about top brands, Apple, Microsoft, Nike, Coca-Cola, whatever, Ferrari doesn't hold their head down at all with any of those major brands. Ferrari is one of the biggest brands ever. Ask someone to, what color, if I asked you, think of a supercar, exotic supercar. What color would you think? Red. When I ask you to name the name of an exotic supercar, super fast exotic supercar, Ferrari, that's what the majority of humanity will say. So their brand is massive, right? And that it will be interesting. I think another key issue around that is how much deference does Ferrari have with Lewis? There's no question that the team is built. There are teams that have been built around Lewis. But as any driver will tell you, when you drive for Ferrari, you drive for Ferrari. Ferrari is always the focus, irrespective of who the driver is, doesn't matter. It's not the driver. And there will be things that Lewis won't actually like that other teams would have, bent over backwards to make sure he's happy with it. Ferrari may not. And he's going to have to deal with that as a Ferrari driver. That's not to say that they won't try to accommodate him during the honeymoon phase of their relationship, but over time, they will ultimately be Ferrari, and the compromise will be required from Lewis's perspective, not the team's perspective. And, they did that with Schumacher. They'll do it with Lewis in the long run. The obvious question that pops to mind is driver harmony with Charles Leclerc. And many suggest that Leclerc, this caught me off guard too, Grace. I was reading some news reports from F1 pundits, people who work in F1, and some of them were saying, look, Charles, he's laid back. He's an easygoing guy. I don't think there'll be any issues with Lewis. I think they're going to get along great. And I was sitting there the whole time. What? And I was quite surprised to hear and read those comments, because apparently they didn't see the Charles that I saw when Vettel was there.
I don't think that means he's not. That makes him sound like he's just like, Todd's going to drive for me. Paul's going to drive for me. Lewis Hamilton's going to drive for me. Whatever. Like that, he is a very competitive. I mean, they're all very competitive, but I was joking. I once, during the pandemic, there was a video of Charles Leclerc and Alex Albon and George and Lando Norris all playing Rocket League together. And it was so funny because the other three are just being like goobers, and because it's just some video game, right, that they're playing together. And Leclerc is not having it. He's just yelling at them like he's competitive in all of it, right? He's just like, Alex, do something, right? Because they're all just like, woo, hitting the ball wherever, we're doing whatever, right? So, I mean, he has a very, which is why we kept watching these videos, because then they're playing Fortnite. And again, the three of them are just like goobering around and shooting things. He's like, the focus, right? You're going to do this. And you flank that guy over here. And they're all just like, oh, whatever. I'm just going to freelance all over the place, right? So it was very funny to kind of watch him take this all very seriously in a way that the other three were just like, well, we're just playing a game. It's fine. So I don't think any driver is just like, well, I don't care. That's, I don't, that just doesn't seem like it makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to be like, guns a-blazing or whatever the turn of phrase is when Lewis shows up. They know each other. They've talked to each other. And like I said, I'm sure that over the past 5 years or however long this rumor has existed, which seems like forever, they've talked. They run into each other. They've had conversation. You want to make sure that you're there. But I always think they asked Jensen Button once as a commentator, like, what's it like racing with Lewis? And he's like, you never go to a team thinking you're the number 2. You would never sign that contract. You would, so it's not like there's no part of, and I would say Jensen Button's talent in comparison to Charles Leclerc's talent, not the same. So if that's how Jensen Button feels with less talent than Charles Leclerc has, I certainly don't. Sorry, Charles Leclerc is like, hey, yeah, whatever. I'll be your Rubens Barrichello. You do what you want, Lewis. Let's help you get the 8th world champ. That is not what he thinks. And I think it's going to he sees it as a way to make the team better. Maybe there's just, again, we always joke about Ferrari strategy. Maybe this is what they need. Maybe they need Lewis to say, here's what would work. I think of like when Valentino Rossi went to Yamaha, and he writes about this in his autobiography, like that he just was kind of like, because they're Japanese, and he's like, dude, it's not about fairness. You can't do this. You have to always be pushing the envelope, and you have to be like, they did this, so you're doing this. And they're like, that's not how we work. Right. And so I just think that it could be like that. There could be some of Lewis Hamilton being loving the Ferrari brand and the team and wanting to be there. But also that love is what makes it want to shake them. Like, get it together, man. Like, here's where you're falling apart. And here's what I saw at McLaren. Here's what I saw at Mercedes. Let's take these things to make this team better. And having Fred there, I think having those kind of fresh eyes definitely is going to help as well.
Yeah, Charles has no interest in being a Bottas style wingman. That is not going to happen.
Not at all.
He wasn't to Vettel, and the two clashed on several occasions in hitting each other, and he has no interest in being a Bottas for Lewis either. That is not going to happen.
No, absolutely not.
The two of them will not.
Who thinks that?
They will not be the new Carlando bromance. That is not going to happen. And especially
they will have some funny videos.
They will, but especially if Lewis is being paid more than Charles. That's not going to go down well either. So I don't think that's going to be as smooth sailing as all of the press that I read about how laid back Charles is and easygoing, and he won't care. Oh, he'll care. Yeah, Charles is. I think it'll
be behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Out front, it's not like he's going to be very.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying, right? Like, what I mean? But I think they do have a chemistry. I mean, it isn't going to be like Lance Stroll and any other driver where there's no chemistry, right? Or like Alonso and Esteban right there towards the end. But but you're right. I don't think that he's just going to be like roll over and show his belly either, which seems to be the narrative. They're going to be just as competitive with each other. And I don't think Hamilton wants that.
Right. I think also this also leaves a question as to if Ferrari feel that Charles is the man to deliver the title. I mean, they've been all behind him. They just did a long-term contract with him. If they didn't feel like he was, why bring in Lewis if you have Charles? Because that's everything you put behind him. And I know that's harsh, but then I got to thinking about it. Okay, well, Charles has had those occasional unforced errors. And that's not something you typically see from Lewis. I'm sorry. It's just Lewis doesn't typically make those anymore as a 7-time champ. I wonder if they feel that maybe this, to your point you just mentioned earlier, Grace, that maybe this pairing clarifies things a little. It puts pressure where pressure is needed
In the right places,
to either
right.
take advantage of Lewis's skill or sharpen Leclerc's, one or the other.
Right.
But maybe they feel it's a little bit of an iron sharpening iron thing here. And, they may be rolling the dice. Lots of people know I'm a Ferrari fan, and they've asked me if I was all bummed out about Lewis coming to Ferrari. And I'm like, well, no, of course not. Lewis is a fantastic driver, and we're all human, for crying out loud. I don't wish the guy ill will or anything like that. I think Lewis is terrific, so I'm happy for him, and I hope it all delivers results for Ferrari ultimately as a Ferrari fan. Having said that, it isn't the move I would have made if I were John Elkann or Fred. They're paying him more. If you think about it, the cost cap is what, 140, 145 million. And if they're paying him 80 or 100 million for 2025 and investing in him in a long-term ambassador role and all this, they're paying him way more than the entire team's cost cap budget. I mean, to me, that doesn't make any sense. Not when you've got Charles Leclerc and Carlos, and I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a decision I would have made, but that's Ferrari, right?
But I think there's some non-monetary value that I think that's what we were just talking to, right? That there's something that Lewis Hamilton brings to the tree. Now, what is that money value? I don't know, right? It's unpaid labor in that sense, right? There's something that he's going to bring to that team that is worth a lot of money to do it. Whether or not that's too much of a dollar value or not, I guess that's negotiable, or, that's a part of discussion. But I think that Ferrari does see a benefit. And I think that's exactly it. That
Clearly.
They're like, you see this you see this in stick and ball sports all the time. Like, you talk about, like in basketball, they talk about like a team, they've been to the playoffs, right? That's meaningful, right? Like they've been to the Super Bowl before. Mm-hmm. Well, in some ways that shouldn't matter, but of course it matters. And so when you bring in a player or, who's been there, it changes the team. It lifts the whole team because that person knows what the playoffs are like and how they're different than regular games and how it's a long season, but you have this, thing. So bringing that just way of being, I guess mentality is the word I'm looking for, to the team, and to be able to say, well, I see that you do it that way, but I think this way over here might work better, and here's why. And it brings the whole, lifts the whole team up. And so there's some dollar value to that. That's going to be more than they ever were going to play Carlos. So, maybe it's too much, but
I hope that's the case. If I was running the team, I would have tried to poach one of Max's peers,
they're
like
banking
George
on
Lando or Oscar. Yeah, they're going to be banking on it. But I would have went for Oscar, Lando, Giorgio.
Oscar and Lando together. I like Oscar.
Yeah, and also I feel Ferrari must believe that the post-race association with Lewis will pay big dividends and for their brand and they have their reasons too. So yeah, from Ferrari's standpoint, I get it. He's a 7-time champion. You're going to pay for that. I think it's an interesting move. Probably born from Fred and his relationship with Lewis and those kind of things. And, Fred's a good buddy with Total Wolff. So I'm sure that'll be an awkward first meeting.
Yeah. They used to live together. I didn't know that. They used to be like flatmates. It's like, oh, how lovely. Yeah. I didn't know where this comment fits in which of your categories, but I think that, again, going back to a job is a job, who your first line signer is, your first line supervisor makes or breaks a job. The person that does your performance evaluation is the person that you're working for. And so I have left jobs because my supervisor changed. I have taken jobs because I was like, I've always wanted to work with Todd. I've heard good things about him. I worked with him on this team, or we wrote this paper together. I really like the cut of his jib. I'd really like to work for Todd. So the fact that Fred is there, I think, does make all the difference in a way that Mattia Binotto did not. He did not gel with Leclerc at all. I don't, so I think that that's a big change for Lewis that's a big incentive for Lewis because it's somebody he knows, he's worked with. They've grown together. And again, your first line supervisor is everything. So.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, Fred.
Let's talk about, should we talk about Mercedes?
Get down.
Let's do.
Sure.
Mercedes had a choice. offer Lewis a long-term deal with post-racing ambassador role or get a 2-year extension and see how things go with their car development. And that's ultimately what they did, the latter. I applaud Mercedes for making the deal they did because there are a lot of moving targets right now for them. Hear me out. They've been poached and several key employees have left.
Yeah.
They've had a tough 3 years with a recalcitrant car that they hung in there too long with. They've gone through ownership changes. They've committed to a big corporate culture change internally. They've slipped into a new cost cap era. All of these issues are very difficult for any team, and they've had to manage all of that, sort of in quick succession. So there's a lot going on. And from what I can tell, people want to throw stones at Mercedes, but I honestly feel like this is the best possible thing to happen for Mercedes. And here's why I say that. How do you unravel yourself from a 7-time champion without taking incoming over the deal? For you newer folks to F1, you could go back and look at Schumacher's separation from Ferrari. Ferrari took a beating when it became clear that they were trying to look at life beyond Michael Schumacher and were effectively showing him the door under the guise of this new dynamic, young and upcoming phenom named Felipe Massa. Which everyone knew was no Schumacher. Felipe, I love you, but you're not Schumacher, right? And everybody knew that. And they even got, Michael to say, well, I'm going to retire. Yeah, that's the ticket. We're going to retire because I've got to make room for this phenom Felipe Massa, which was a joke, right? And everybody knew it. And Ferrari took a drubbing over this. And it was a bad look that they tried to save face by having Schumacher retire when ultimately they were trying to unwrap themselves from the Schumacher thing and think about life beyond that, right? So
Schumacher made it look like he was surprised. I'm sorry, the press conference, he seemed very surprised. Like this was news to him too that he was retiring, not like something they've been talking about for some time.
Yeah. Right. Now, whether we admit it or not, Lewis has a lot of gravitas and weight on a team. I mean, he's a 7-time champion, right? It's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders as a team. And you got to be very careful in how you handle that weight on your shoulders. A quiet 2-year extension, for example, knowing Lewis wouldn't be happy about it, but they let this ride knowing that he may bolt, and he did a year earlier, and I think that caught them off guard. Okay, so he did. That's what happened. Okay. But it caught him off guard, kind of like Nico's exit caught him off guard, right? But I think Toto and the team are in their best possible position because they weren't the ones who walked away from Lewis. He left them, and now they have 100% focus on the new young guns. They have an open seat for new young talent or another, seasoned veteran, whatever they want to do. It gives them more alacrity and more agility in F1 with a massive cost savings, huge cost savings, right? It's a complete win for Mercedes without all of the Lewis baggage and expense. And there's a part of me that thinks Toto knew this, when he offered the 2-year deal. So kudos to him. It was a shrewd move. I think you might argue that they don't have the Lewis talent now, and that's very true. They don't. But I would say George was giving Lewis all he wanted for the last 2 years, and if they get their crap together and build an exceptional car, they won't need Lewis's talent. Hell, Bottas was winning races with their exceptional car. So that's kind of my thinking. What do they get in this? You will see drivers begin to approach Mercedes immediately. If I were Merck, I personally would go for Lando, Oscar, or Carlos. The other major issue is that Lewis, it's one thing that Lewis leaves. One thing Mercedes got to be careful is he doesn't start poaching more personnel like Bono, right? So they got to be very careful. So Yeah, they're going to save money in Lewis, but they may lose a little money because they're going to have to offer Bono and other key personnel more money to stay, right? So, but any departing Mercedes employee would have to move to Italy, and I don't know that that's always in everybody's cards when they all live in the UK and their families are there. So that's tough too.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the
Go
thing
ahead.
is too is we have to remember these are humans, right? I'm not saying that you don't say that, but like Bono isn't just a pawn, right? He's a person that gets to decide some part of where he wants to be and what team he wants to be at, and it's just like, you know, letting go of Seidel, right? Like you don't want somebody at your team that you could force to stay there, but boy, that's just going to be miserable for everybody. So you know, I could see that, but it could also be again similar to the Mark Marquez situation where he left the team, but he couldn't take any of his people with him. And so again, it does depend on what the contracts look like and what each of those individuals are willing to do, because it never can a company just, you know,
true.
It doesn't behoove them to just force, you know, Bono or something like that to just, too bad, you're my employee. They're just gonna destroy your team and your morale. So I think they have to think about
and I know it sounds
all those other things too.
And I know it sounds harsh. I'm not trying to be. I just try to the way I always look at issues in Formula One is I try to compartmentalize the issue, right? So when I'm thinking Lewis, I'm thinking about Lewis. When I'm thinking Mercedes, I'm thinking about Mercedes. It's nothing against Lewis or Ferrari or anything else. I'm just thinking about Mercedes in particular and them as a team and where does this leave them? And, you know, having seen, you know, Ferrari and what they went through from a PR perspective of trying to ditch Schumacher was massive. And I think that this actually plays out really well for Mercedes. I'm not marginalizing the personal relationships Toto has with Lewis and other team members, and those are all important. But Mercedes gets to politely unravel itself from Lewis. They won't be known as the team that dumped Lewis, it didn't give him what he wanted and was, you know, mean to him or whatever it might be. This allows them a lot more cash, a lot more alacrity to make the right decisions and to focus on the car. So your thoughts?
For now. It does for now.
Yeah, for now, yeah.
We'll see when we're at like summer break how this unraveling bromance is looking, right? I think I'm sorry. I think
it's the black lung really, pop.
Oh, pop. I think that's the thing that's most interesting is that, you know, it's not like we've never had drivers leaving before. It's that we have a whole year. I think that was part of the the shock of it, you know, that it was just like, yeah, if we were at summer break, we'd be like, oh, okay, you know, well, he's been looking. If drivers do that, it's fine, you know, okay, you know, whatever. But it's the fact that he's going to have to go a whole year with Mercedes, and
if
I don't know how
Grace,
that's like that's
weird. I wouldn't let him anywhere near the granularity of that car.
I mean, they can't,
team.
right? Like
you wouldn't.
Because you'd also, and if you knew he was taking Bono with him, for example, I mean, there's a lot of other staff whose names I don't know, right? Because you only really know like 4 or 5 people that are in F1 manager. I don't know anybody else's names, but we'll just stick with Bono. We all know who he is.
You know, Shove.
Yeah. We do, right? And so I do know more Mercedes because they do videos. But if he's going to take Bono with him, they work that out, and that's fine. Well, now that's a whole nother person you have to shield from knowing all your stuff, right? That's right? Because you certainly aren't going to send Bono on 9 months of gardening leave so he doesn't learn stuff. So I think there is a weird management system that. Well, these don't have mutes. It's not like Zoom. Like I've been like this all day, but at work I can just push the mute button and then nobody has to hear me coughing. I didn't invent this system that doesn't have a mute button.
It does on our recording. It does. Down your little microphone, you just click on it. It'll go red. Mute you.
Oh, well then I didn't know that. Look at that. I learned something.
See?
Let me try that right now. Look.
Are you muted?
Well,
Can't
it did
hear
work.
You, it works.
It's great. I learned something. So now for the rest of the podcast, you won't have to listen to me cough because now I know how to mute myself. So nonetheless, I think that there are other complications, right? That it's not just Lewis, even though that's what's right in front of our faces and that's what we all think about. That, there's all these other places that it, like sinks into, and how is he just going to like live his life, and how is Toto going to run this team, and how are they all going to like not talk about it? I think it's going to be hard for a whole year, not just like a month or two.
One of the Patreon supporters, Miller Time, asked, well, perhaps do you think Lewis will lay back this year in lieu of his departure from Mercedes? And it's a good point. I think my opinion on that, and share yours, Grace, my opinion on that would be, it depends on how competitive the car is, but I'll guarantee you this thing, all the focus is going to be on George's side of that garage. George will become the absolute priority for this team in 2024. If the car is super competitive and George has some mechanical failures in DNF and Lewis finds himself in the lead and the car's competitive, I don't think he'll lay back, because it's not in Lewis's nature to do so. Lewis wants to win. Why would you lay
back?
Yeah,
right. Because he could still get a championship. He
could be a little salty over the fact that Mercedes wasn't willing to pony up with the big contract post racing, and maybe that is why he announced this a year early, because it's a little bit of a poke in the eye. But Lewis is about Lewis, as he should be. It's not a criticism, just as I'd say the same. Charles is about Charles, and he should be. So Lewis is about Lewis, and if he had a whiff of getting an eighth title this season, he won't lay back. But yeah, it's a good point. Anyway, sorry, Grace.
No. I mean, I interrupted you. I think the answer is no, he's going to race as if this season counts, because it does count.
It does.
He still could win a championship out of this, or he still could get points out of this. And for sure, he has relationships with the people at Mercedes. He doesn't want to, he could get them Christmas bonuses and next year get Ferrari Christmas bonuses. Why limit himself, right? Like, I think he's going to race just as hard this year, even though, that's going to go, and they're going to have to, they've had a conversation, maybe that's the positive of this happening before the season starts, is they've just had to like, it's like a divorce court or something. We're going to have to sit in this room. We're going to figure out how to co-parent for the next year, because we still got to get through this, And so what is that going to look like? And what are the parameters? And what are they going to tell Lewis? And what is Lewis, because that's the last thing you want either, is for Lewis to like be in the press pin after a race and be like, I told you they were terrible. See what they did to me. See how that, like, you don't want that either. Right. So I think they have to come to terms with how this year's going to work. And, I don't know. You only have so many years in this sport. I mean, he could get injured, or he could decide he's had enough, or, but he's not a spring chicken. And most drivers, the fact that Alonso's still racing as long as he is pretty impressive.
It is.
Very few drivers make it that long.
Let's talk about some of the orbital issues around this. This does leave a lot of speculation about who will take the empty seat at Mercedes. Could it be Alonso? Could it be Lando? Could it be Oscar, Carlos, Albon, or a junior driver from their junior driver program? I think Toto kind of mentioned, well, we could get aggressive and pull one up from our junior program. Mick Schumacher's another that people are throwing out there. This will set off the 2024 silly season very early, because if a driver from another team moves, this is like a ripple effect. But with the new contracts for Lando and Charles, this limits the option Mercedes may have unless they have escape clauses in their contracts, right? So those two conceivably on paper would be off limits for Mercedes for next year because they have contract extensions. We'll see. If they had an escape clause, maybe they could get out of that. It also makes the market for top drivers kind of hot. Right? If Red Bull, Aston, or Audi want one of the aforementioned drivers, they'll be in a bit of a bidding war with Mercedes, right?
Right.
And so it just depends. So I think, it's like when you're in the home real estate, it's either a buyer's market or a seller's market, and I think it's going to be a driver's market more than a team market in some sense for the top drivers. Not only is this good for Toto and not having to unravel himself from the weight of Lewis, but George becomes the de facto number one, and that's justified given his performance in the last two seasons. I think he's a very fast driver, and I think that's good for George to have all of that focus around him. I think Charles may not take this one sitting down. He didn't do so with Seb. He banged with Seb, and I don't think he will with Lewis either. I think that could get a little spicy during the season. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's again, not that you're saying this, but people have to keep in mind that they've been doing this since they were 4, and they've always been racing their friends. They've always been racing the champion. They've always been racing you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So for us, it's like, oh my God, Charles Leclerc, you're going to be racing with Lewis Hamilton on your team. When he was in karting, there was some Lewis Hamilton that was in his team, or when he was in, the junior leagues, he raced against some Lewis Hamilton, right? Like, so in that sense, they've always had to deal with like your position in the team, who else is at your team, even though we really only think of them as maybe, GP2 and, Formula One or something like that. I think that they're always kind of, they're used to this sort of a situation.
Yep.
Of jockeying in a team.
And I think finally for me on the orbital issues is, boy, this is going to make a great DTS episode.
Yeah, somewhere that
Isn't
director
that
was
what
like,
it's all about?
They just all those little dollar signs, just like this just writes itself.
Exactly.
I think that I feel like, I always like the idea of like Hamilton and Alonso having this ongoing, anything you can do, I can do better kind of competition. He was like, Alonso was like, 2023 silly season, here I come. And Lewis Hamilton was like, hold my beer, 2025, here it comes. But I'm announcing it now in 2024. Like,
right.
I'm still going to beat you, Alonso. I'm still going to have the biggest news, silly season, off season news story about my driver's change.
Right.
But of course, this is just one step closer to my dream of Lance Stroll rolling on out of there, since he has a rolling contract, and just rolling Carlos right in there, so we can have Alonso and Carlos in Aston. So I don't know why it's right there for you, Lawrence. Just sign away. Why wouldn't you want this? And he could just be there for a year or two and then go to Audi, and everybody's happy, and Alonso will retire, and you can bring your son back in, and whoever else you can sign to the team, and everybody's happy. We just have this like 2-year adventure.
Stephen, patron Stephen said Grosjean made a joke post about taking the seat, and then he said, they still owe him a test. I think he's right.
They do.
Yeah,
that's
they
true.
do. Let's see. So, well, all of this discussion, let us know what you think about Lewis to Ferrari. Those are my thoughts. Those are Grace's thoughts and opinions about it. But let us know what you think. The one thing I do know is that this news, be it leaked or not, sure did shut down all the incoming fire that F1 was taking over their Andretti decision, and it stopped all the discussions in social media. And then when the Lewis thing kind of died down and people started looking at Andretti again, whoa, there's a Christian Horner drama. Ooh, everybody's talking about that, But I'm going to talk about the Andretti situation. So let's jump in and talk about it. For me, it was a verbose post that they made with all this litany of justifications, and I'm going to try
F1 made. That
F1 made.
Michael Andretti is one to also bloviate, so I just want to be clear about which bloviating we were talking about here.
This is F1 bloviating. One of the comments was, quote, "Our assessment did not involve any consultation with the current F1 teams. However, in considering the best interests of the championship, we took account of the impact of the entry of an 11th team on all commercial stakeholders in the championship," end quote. Ultimately, folks, this is all about the money. All right. We can wax poetic with a list of careful considerations, air quote, but I find it very patronizing. And the fact that F1 didn't know the other team's thoughts on this is a bit laughable. They know darn well what the other team's thoughts were on this. The other comment they made, quote, "While the Andretti name carries some recognition for F1 fans, our research indicates that F1 would bring value to Andretti brand rather than the other way around," end quote.
This is just more evidence that they don't know what they're doing. So when you were talking earlier about, when people think of a team, they think of Ferrari, right? When you think of a sports car color, you think of red. If you ask any American, name one race car driver, I'm pretty sure most of them say Mario Andretti. Bring it down a notch, Formula One. I saw that. I was like, why? Who let that even be in there? I can't believe you let that go. Get out of here.
I don't know who wrote
Andretti.
That. It doesn't seem like something Stefano would write. This is very, very heavy-handed in my opinion, and the real insult to a name and team that has forged a legacy in motorsport along the lines of like Penske. I'm all for historic teams like Ferrari and McLaren in F1, but F1 should know that Andretti and Penske are our American versions of that and should show some damn respect of what they've achieved without F1's incredible brand attached to them, right?
Get out of here, Formula One.
It's so ham-fisted. The whole response is just...
I think the hardest thing about reading that whole thing was that they would make a point and then it's just like, you could be like, ... But what about Haas?
Yeah. ...
What about Stick F1? Like, there's
exactly.
You have all these backmarker teams and you're like, we just can't have Andretti in here. He's going to bring down the sport. Yeah. It's just like, what about those other dudes that are in your sport? I'm pretty sure Haas isn't helping you out.
You didn't require any of this from Haas.
Not a damn thing. So I just think it was so lame. I just can't believe that you had some 2-year, maybe they had ChatGPT write it and they just never read it as a human being.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I can't, some of these things I'm like, you let this go out? Like,
I couldn't believe it.
I don't understand. I just thought it was pretty, and I always think too, like, if I can off the top of my head go like, well, this is why that's not a real reason, we're in trouble. Because I agree. Albon's cat's here, right? Like I don't have that kind of like historical memory. And if I'm like, what about Gene Haas? Well, then you're in trouble if I can find a hole in your argument in 5 seconds. So
I can't imagine that Greg Moffair or anyone at Liberty Media read this and thought this is okay. I have to think this is a lawyer and not an American lawyer who wrote this, because if you were an American, you know damn well that you don't do a drive-by verbal shooting like that. I mean, that isn't, that was a real low blow, if I'm honest, on everything that they've achieved. Very heavy-handed. The fact that also that they said they tried to contact Andretti about an in-person meeting, but had no response. And it was later discovered that it was just an F1 employee that sent an email that wasn't recognized at Andretti. It went into the spam folder. And then F1 said, well, we didn't hear back from him, so we denied him entry. Instead of Stefano calling Michael in such base behavior on such a major issue, I find that laughable. Who would say, well, we tried to reach out, they never responded in a couple of days, so we just canceled it. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? This is a major issue.
Yeah, and we made sure that the email address was, n.camber, so that at FIA.com. So we were sure that the spam filter would pick it up, right? Like, right. But you're right. Like, if I send an email to my boss, it's something important, and I don't think they see it, then I send them a chat message, or I pick up the phone, or I email them again and go, hey, friendly reminder, just want to bring this to the top of your inbox. Nowhere is, I just didn't hear from you, so I assumed that you weren't coming.
Yeah.
And any businesses that ever an answer, I was floored by that as well. I was like, I can't believe that is what you said, that you went with. No. Like, send him a letter, send him a FedEx or something, or whatever, where you have to get it signed, right? Something, so that you knew that he saw it. You have no idea that he saw it. And that it didn't come from Domenicali himself. Come on.
Now, just put this in context, folks. We're talking about one of the largest sporting enterprises in the world. And this is what they put out? Well, we sent them an email. They never got back to us. Well, we think that Andretti would benefit more from the association than we would. I mean, really? This thing is so ham-fisted. I cannot believe that this is how the business is ran. And they did no visits to Andretti's operation in the UK or US to see their progress and the concern, that it was a going concern. Didn't see their building a 2025 or 2026 car, a chassis already. And then they said, well, the whole fact that they're wanting to come in 2025 and then the regulation changed in 2026, it really gives us concern that they propose to come in right when the regulation changes, spend all the money on 2025 and only to redo it in 26. And they said, quote, the fact that the applicant proposes to do so gives us reason to question their understanding of the scope of the challenge involved.
Did you question Gene? Because that's how they got here.
Right.
You didn't.
And then Andretti.
You think we have no memory?
Yeah. Andretti responded to that and said, no, we were always shooting for 2026. The reason we applied early is for 2025 is because we know it takes so damn long for the process to be approved.
You idiots.
Yeah, that's why we did it. And do you think if we didn't reply to an email that you might just pick up the phone and call Mario or Michael?
But the thing is that Michael Andretti, I'm no Michael Andretti fan, but he has an IndyCar team. Like, that's the other thing too, is they're like,
and a Formula E team.
Right. What more proof of concept do you need?
Right.
No, yeah, I get it. Formula One is different than E and is different than IndyCar and is different, blah, 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 blah. But you let people in who have no experience running a team at all, and you're going to say this guy, oh, sorry, you don't have enough for us. I don't know what more proof of concept you need here. It seems like a sure bet if you're going to let somebody in.
To me, it would. I also find it odd that they pulled out all of the stops to attract Audi back to the sport. And by the way, Audi
still may not stay in.
Yeah, right. And Audi is using Sauber and Ferrari engines for 3 years before getting their own engine program, right?
But Michael, don't you dare do that.
Right. And yet they have no interest in Andretti except to suggest that, well, if GM actually makes an engine, then we'll talk to you, maybe 2028. It's like,
maybe possibly.
My God.
We'll grace you with our presence.
The amount of arrogance is astounding.
If they had just come out and said, we don't like you. We don't like the cut of your jib. We like Mario. We love Mario.
Right.
You, not so much. You're a jerk face. We're done with you. We all remember from you from the 90s. Please don't ever come back again. I can at least respect that. At least you were being honest. All of these 20 things that you had to create, just say it's going to cost too much money. The teams don't want to do it. And we don't like your face.
I know.
Problem solved. 3 points. Save us all the time.
I could not believe I was reading that, and I couldn't believe that came from F1. I think at this point, I'd be surprised if they still even want to join F1 after this. And who knows? They may be assessing whether they have any legal action given the millions that they've spent already in prepping their program for F1. And you might say, well, that's Michael's fault for spending money without the approval. But they did get approval from the FIA. And in order to apply, you have to show a program, an initial investment in that program to be taken seriously. So they jumped through the right hoops. I mean, remember Zorn GP? Yeah, you don't? Well, Google it and you'll read about missing tires and wheels and how important that is to have a program up and going and not just a name.
I mean, and that's the thing though, too, is that, I mean, when we talked about the story last Monday, when the story came out on The Athletic, that it was just like, something, right? Because nobody would go through all of this on a hope and a prayer.
No.
Right? He has, Ben Silliam's word. He has the backing of the FIA. It seems like, the F1 will come around. This is only a technicality or something, because you wouldn't go through all this effort if you didn't think it was going to pay off. Nobody's that dumb.
Right.
He's got plenty of things, as we just spoke about, to spend money on.
Right. And I'll be surprised. The FIA said they were assessing it. I will be surprised to see if this whole issue is over yet. The FIA and Formula One, commercial rights, they're at odds with each other on who really owns that sport and controls it.
As you've put, that's been a problem, right? And Ben Silliam's been a problem. So I think this is going to come to head. And if I was Michael Andretti, of which I'm not, but I think I have a similar personality to him. The more you tell me you can't have this, well, you're wrong, the more I'm going to fight to get it. So Michael is not going to back down. That is not how this works. And his operational defiance will just be like, that's it.
Right.
I'm doing it now. Hell or high water, I'm doing it.
So ham-fisted.
So,
all right. You know what it is. It's Albin's Cats. Oh, we're going to have fun on this one. Hey, I'm not going to get too much in the weeds on this story, just to suggest that there was a story that broke today that Red Bull Corporate out of Austria is engaged in an investigation with third-party barristers to investigate some allegations of inappropriate behavior from Christian Horner by an employee. Now, I could parse this. I gotta tell you, it's really disheartening to see all of the made up BS blogs and everyone else saying, hey, there was some people that said that he was sending inappropriate photos of himself to a female employee. Oh, he was doing this or that. None of that has been said at all. The details are so light on this that nobody even knows who made the complaint, what the complaint was. Nobody knows anything. And I will tell you that the whole thing is very sus to me. I don't quite understand it, other than the timing that it adds more smokescreen to the Andretti story. I don't quite, something isn't right, as Grace said. The math isn't mathing on this thing. And so finally I tweeted something this afternoon. I said, all of these suppositions, hints, and innuendos and allegations are surreal, folks. Just stop it. Everybody take a breath and let's just wait a bit to see what comes out of this. So I'll cover it in more detail. We'll talk about it in more detail as it fleshes out. But for me to wax poetic now about it, it would be as nonsensical as the idiots that are posting and making up stories about Christian because they don't like him. I think that's really weird.
We'll talk about it in more details when there are details.
Yeah, when there are details. But in other news, Grace has done a little homework for all of you. So all of you out there, have, undoubtedly watched DTS, Drive to Survive on Netflix.
Yeah.
Well, your dreams have been answered because some of you out there are NASCAR fans, and NASCAR has just released their Drive to Survive series. I can't remember the name of it, Grace, but Grace has fallen on the sword for us. She's jumped on the grenade, and she has watched at least the first episode or more, and she's going to give us a review. Grace, take it away.
Just the first episode that's on watch. I think there's like 6 of them. I don't remember what it's called either, but yeah. So I think too long, didn't read. I found it boring, and that's not a slam. Not like, oh, Grace, you don't like NASCAR. First of all, I used to watch NASCAR religiously, and about 20 years ago, I kind of started watching Formula One, just like everything else, and I couldn't watch everything, so I stopped watching NASCAR. But I still followed it for a long time, and so to me, this would be I'm primed, right? I used to go to NASCAR races. I used to really follow NASCAR. I still watch motorsports, even though not NASCAR. I feel like I'm the prime audience. This is your chance. You don't really have to explain the sport to me.
Right. When you
just have to get me into it, because now I don't know who any, like I've heard of Joey Logano, but all the people I knew from racing have retired, right? A long time ago. Like, I was surprised that Kevin Harvick is still racing. Right.
I
think he's the only name that I know, really. So
maybe Denny Hamlin. I don't know.
Right. And so, but I think the thing is, first of all, we all make fun, we all mock, jokingly or not, of Will Buxton. But what Will Buxton brings to DTS is excitement, right? He goes, and you know what? And then he did this, and then he did this thing, and then you do this, and they cut it with some footage, and then you talk about this thing. And so Will Buxton acts as that enthusiastic narrator that kind of explains the backstories quickly, right? Because you don't have a lot of time to dig into this, like, the history of Ferrari or these long-standing beefs between like Lewis and Alonso, but they use Will Buxton as a way to get you that history quickly of why people might feel a certain way about Max, or why they might feel a certain way Lewis Hamilton. Mm-hmm.
He can make the obvious sound like the extraordinary.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a real talent. And that's why we always kind of like, oh, Will Buxton, and we kind of poke at him. But it was really clear to me that is a real talent that he has. And that DTS really uses Will Buxton to kind of, like you were saying, make the mundane really exciting. So they kind of used Dale Earnhardt Jr. as Will Buxton. And I mean, Jr. is a very flat affect. Yeah, Junior. Well, I mean, if it was Senior, that would involve a seance, right? That would be a whole different kind of show, right? But Junior, he knows a lot about the sport, but he's very flat in delivery. Like he's not a broadcaster. He's not he doesn't get really excited. He also has a show, I think it's on Netflix, where he goes to like historic tracks that I've watched, because if it's, North Wilkesboro or someplace that I'm like, oh, right, I remember that track. It's really interesting, but only for an anorak. Like I'm not going to get any of my friends to like, let's watch this show about this grown over NASCAR track where Junior at the end collects the dirt in a jar like he's Dexter and he's going to save that jar for later, right? Like nobody's watching that unless you're an anorak and you would be interested in that kind of history.
This is Cale Yarborough run. Yep. It's totally like Dexter. But anyway, but to me that's interesting, right? And he talks about, Cale Yarborough or Richard Petty, like all these like historic things that I find interesting. Yeah. But he's not in itself like what gets you jazzed, right? You have to be into the subject that Junior knows a lot about, and you'll learn a lot, but he's not really exciting in the same way Will Buxton did. So they really don't have that. And then they build on none of the history of it. Like so the first episode focused on Denny Hamlin. I know the name, but I don't really know anything about Denny Hamlin. And they just does anyone?
Well, I guess people, but they're just like, people hate Denny Hamlin. Well, they never get into why do people hate him? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, like
you got to unpack it a little.
Right. And so again, that's where Will Buxton would help. But if we talked about like, why don't people like Dale Earnhardt Sr., right? Like he was always a bad guy, right? Like, why don't people like him? Well, that's part of his like ethos. And he was the like, and so you could really explain why somebody didn't like Earnhardt or Kevin Harvick. Yep. But they just kind of like leave Denny Hamlin. And to me, that's also the thing too, is that if you can't make the bad guys exciting, what are you going to do with the good guys? They're always boring, right? Like Jeff Gordon's boring, but Dale Earnhardt is interesting, right? So I just think they never really get into who Denny Hamlin is, why he's interested. They show him in his house. He's in this like giant, beautiful house, and he's like, I earned all this. Well, now he just sounds like, that clip you play for Lance Stroll, right? He sounds like Farouk Assault, right?
I want
like
it now! What's the matter with those twats down there?
Yeah.
Right, because they don't show him like Ocon, Esteban Ocon in a van with his parents or something like that. Who is Denny Hamlin? I don't know. Maybe it just makes him sound very entitled. And that's not a great look. And I don't know if he is or not, right? It was just not becoming to why at all people hate him. And then they kind of talk about how it's interesting because he has a driver, he's a driver and has a team. He races for Joe Gibbs, but Joe Gibbs' grandson's on his team. And like, they just don't really build it at all. I just thought that was there was an opportunity missed there. And then they talk about Daytona, right? So I think again, going back to like, pick a sports car color, red, name a track, Daytona comes up. I think that's an iconic track.
Yeah, sure.
United States that people would think of, maybe Indianapolis, Daytona, right? The Daytona 500 is a big thing. And so they talk about how the NASCAR starts at Daytona and the last race before the playoff starts is Daytona. And they're like, that's so interesting and so important. Flat. They don't show any history of them like running on the sand. Yeah. They don't show any of this sort of like, why does Daytona matter?
Yeah, right.
Like
definitely made for anoraks then.
I guess, but it was boring. I'm hoping that the other episodes maybe pick up because again, like I feel that I was close, but my last point is there's a MotoGP game that came, I think it's 2 years old, the MotoGP game. But they tell you the history. They tell you this video, like, here's, Rossi and he's fighting Lorenzo at this track and they're doing this thing. And you are so into the story. And then they're like, and now you're Rossi and boom. And they drop you into the race. I mean, it's so compelling. And all it is this like it wasn't very long because it's a video game. How long? It's probably like a minute and a half at most of this sort of backstory. They're like, and Casey Stoner did this. The next thing you know, boom, you're in Australia and you're Casey Stoner. And you have to, it was just their way to like get you through the tutorial, right? Like the little things you have to learn was by giving you this little historical video. If you can do it with a MotoGP video game, what is NASCAR doing? You have so much history in the same way Formula One does.
Right.
It was so flat. I hope it gets better. But as somebody who used to watch and hasn't watched for 20 years, I don't know why I would keep watching based on that first episode.
Well, there you go. There's your review, folks. Watch at your own caution.
Or, have some caffeinated beverage or something with you. I don't know.
Yeah. Why not?
It could have been more interesting.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, let's back out of the podcast and we will save our Red Bull Christian Horner story until next week. Maybe there'll be more information.
When we have some details.
Yeah, that would be handy instead of us making crap up. All right. So again, huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters that have joined us. I see you, everybody on that's joined us in the audience and have been chatting with us during the call. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us. We hope you enjoy this. This is a great fun for us to interact. And Dave wants to know: are you doing a Drivers on Tires wrap up show? Yeah, we do.
We haven't seen any yet, have we?
I haven't. Well, there was 2 launches today, but I don't know that I saw Drivers on Tires, but we're going to have to look for it. But yeah, probably we'll do a season preview show and talk about it then. But anyway.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. Good night, Melton, and everybody online in the audience. And if you like this podcast, you go to iTunes, give us a good rating or your favorite podcast player. Give us some love over there. We'd appreciate it. As always, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so. Go to our website, theparkforme.com, and you'll see kind of midway down, it says support us. At the very bottom, it says support us. So you can click on that, support us in any way you feel compelled. That would be greatly appreciated. And until next week, when we come back to do all of this over again with Grace, this is Todd, aka Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace. Grace is muted. She's muted.
See you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Oh my God.
That's great.
It's just like being in a meeting.
It is.
Where's my mute button?
That's not what I feel I got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out